Welcome to MacVoices TV. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. I'm happy to welcome back after, a while since we've seen him on the Mac jury, Mr. Erik Bernskiold, a web designer, graphics guy, and graphics educator, and what else? What did I miss, Erik?
I think that is it. It sounds like me.
It sounds like a pretty good roster, And as we talk, you're getting ready, I guess, starting to think about packing and coming across the pond to Photoshop World.
Yes, I am indeed. It's going to be fun being at Photoshop World March, 24th through 26th in DC, which is going to be fun.
Now, are you instructing this year, or are you just attending?
I'm attending, having fun, hanging out with everybody, meeting friends. The fun social aspect, which is, half the show is about meeting friends.
The shows are always about meeting friends, but you still end up taking so much more away than just, it being a big party. So
yep.
That's great. That's great. Well, I wanted to ask you to come on and talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening in the graphics world. And the two things I think that are at the top of the roster for many people, I won't say most, but many people, if they're into graphics, is the Creative Cloud, the Adobe Creative Cloud, and what it's doing in regard to some of their higher-end products. And also, more importantly, more currently perhaps, the release of the new version of Lightroom. And I'll let you tell me where we should start. Should we start with Lightroom since it's the newest?
Let's start with Lightroom.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is Lightroom and why do I care?
Well, Lightroom is Adobe's main photo editing workflow. So you can import photos to it, you can develop them, edit them, show slideshows, print, go to the web, pretty much do anything quite easily and quite simply. So even though you can edit photos, raw files and everything in Photoshop or Pixelmator or other similar apps, Lightroom is sort of the full editing workflow suite.
So does this mean that I can consider Lightroom a replacement for Photoshop?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Everything that you can do in Photoshop, you can't do in Lightroom. But depending on what you do to your photos, perhaps everything you do to your photos, you can do in Lightroom.
Okay.
It's hard to say for every, I can't sit here and say, for everybody, just keep using Photoshop, because that's not going to be the case.
Right. Now, how about in comparison to Aperture? Because it seems like for the Apple folks, of which we are all part, the progression is if you're an amateur, if you are a mid-level amateur, maybe even if you're a serious amateur, you get started with iPhoto, and then maybe you graduate to Aperture. But it seems like if you look at Aperture, then you almost have to look at Lightroom. So that those are the two products we compare. How are they stacking up right now against each other, Erik?
I think they're fairly close. For basic image editing workflows, both work fine. If you started with Aperture, then maybe you're fine with Aperture. I'm not going to sit here saying you have to switch, or there's this one major compelling reason for everybody to switch. But on the other hand, the reason why I choose to start working with Lightroom when I started picking a software over Aperture is that it integrates so well with Photoshop. The fact that you can bring in a raw file from Lightroom into Photoshop as what's called a smart object, meaning you can go back and edit the raw file again, just is a deal breaker to me. And the fact that I like the integration to Photoshop, which you inevitably end up having to use.
So you're kind of convincing me that if I'm a photo professional, this is something I really need to look at. But if I'm a mid-level to higher-end kind of amateur photographer, or even a serious point-and-shoot guy, it may be something I want to consider, but it's not high on my priority list.
Well, it depends. If you want to edit your photos and just want to, I take raw files and I want to process them, then Lightroom is not only a very powerful solution, but it's also very simple, because you sit there with the interface that's very task-oriented. You're going to edit the photo now, and you're presented with a series of sliders, they've revamped the entire editing interface in Lightroom 4, so not only does it process raw files better, but the interface is easier to understand, and the sliders that are now part of the developed architecture is simplified, so it's easier to edit. So as a mid-level or even hobbyist, Lightroom sure is a good bet. And previously, we've been able to compare it to Aperture when Apple slashed the price on Aperture. I believe they brought it down to $79. Am I right?
I think that's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When it came to the iTunes or the Mac App Store.
Mac App Store.
Right.
Yeah. And so we've had this pretty big price gap between $79 for Aperture and $299 for Lightroom. However, since today, when we're recording this, Lightroom 4 is shipping today, and Lightroom has a new price, and its new price is $149. So comparing it to Aperture at this point, I think, and this is my personal opinion, I like Lightroom more. And I don't think that the price difference is, enough to warrant the deep comparison on price.
But you're talking about almost double the price for something. So you make me almost, if I were trying to make this decision, I'd probably sit down and say, okay, key feature versus key feature, both for what I am doing now and maybe what I want to do.
Sure. Again, it depends on sort of how you work with your photos. Of course, I would. Now, I'd say download a trial of Lightroom and see how you like it. And I wish I could say the same about Aperture, because that's how I advise people to choose software. Now that the Mac App Store doesn't allow you for trial downloads, which kind of sucks, it's hard to make that call, because Aperture has a different editing workflow. Its interface is very different. And personally, I'm slightly annoyed by it, and I like the more modular approach that Lightroom has. On the other hand, you might really like that and find Lightroom annoying. So all you can do now is, for example, try Lightroom and see if you like it.
If I missed it, forgive me, but explain what you mean by the modular approach.
Well, so Aperture's when you bring up editing, it's sort of a HUD panel, heads-up display. Whereas Lightroom, you switch from what's called the library module, where you organize your photos, to the develop module, and you go through what I think is a more organized approach and a series of full organized windows. And it's just personal feel. I like Lightroom's way of editing more than I like Aperture's, because I've always felt that it is a bit cluttered. But again, personal, and I would advise anyone to test it. It's just that it's very hard to test Aperture without buying it.
Understood. But there are plenty of screencasts out there. There are plenty of video that at least you can go and watch people walk through it, even if you can't get your hands on it yourself.
Absolutely.
Erik, how about learning curve? And I say that from two aspects. First of all, if I'm just going to make the jump from iPhoto to Lightroom or Aperture, or if I'm already an Aperture user and I'm looking covetously at what Lightroom offers, what's my learning curve going to be like in each scenario?
Well, if you're switching, I think you're going to find yourself, not having to, just to get started and doing, the same kind of work. It's going to be, you're going to manage it, because it's the same terminology. It's the same mindset in a way. Then again, if you want to learn the deep features, you're definitely going to have to spend some time looking at videos. Now, there are tons of videos that are free tutorials for Lightroom, because it's such a big community. So there's no shortage of them to be found for even the smallest features.
These things always get a little frustrating, Erik, because we are talking about pro-level programs.
We are.
So that's difficult for people, because you're talking about investing, at least by today's standards, maybe not Adobe standards, but by today's standards, a lot of money into something like
Absolutely.
this. And you're talking about that learning curve we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So that is why I really want to stress, don't just sit here and say, well, this feature on paper and spec looks to be good. But there is a trial version, at least, of Lightroom, and you can do your way, screencast and Aperture, and at least try and get a feeling. But you certainly do want to take advantage of the 30-day trial in Lightroom. See, is this something, A, I really need, B, I have use for, and C, is it worth the price? And do I like the interface and the way it works? You have two comparable apps. If you know Photoshop a lot and you're planning to bring your images into Photoshop, maybe Lightroom is a really good bet, because it is, has really tight integration. And the new developed presets, and then the new 2012 process version is gorgeous, and it's really easy to make stunning photos, which they can be done in Aperture, it just takes longer. But try it.
How about key features or new features? And I'm especially interested in the new features.
Well, so a few of you listening might have been using the beta version, which has been around for a while. And the key features in Lightroom 4 is you can now make photo books. So you have a books module. You can map out your photos using geodata. So you can get your GPS data into Lightroom, see where you've been in the entire globe, and click to see what photos you took at a specific place. And then, of course, there's what I alluded to earlier, the 2012 process version, which is entirely new. New sliders, it's a new way of thinking about it, which is fantastic and makes editing photos much simpler. Now, if you have been using the beta version and you haven't yet downloaded a trial of the full version, shipping version, or if you haven't yet bought it, they have added some new things which weren't in the beta version. For example, reverse geotagging. So you can say these photos were taken here. You can get the full geotag info so you get the longitude and latitude from your GPS app. And when you pull it into Lightroom, Lightroom can add city, state, country into the photo afterwards, which is really neat because you don't have to do that manually. And there are some other things, bunch of bugs found fixed, white balance control fixed, updated presets, and increased the size of the books that were allowed from the beta. And of course, added camera support for all the new cameras that's been released.
Got it.
It's quite a big new feature set.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so here's your big chance to plug something that you haven't even done yet. What kind of coverage are you going to be giving to the new Lightroom on all of the sites that you operate?
Well, when it comes to Lightroom this time around, I'm taking it a bit easy, but I'm going to plug my friends who have some incredible coverage. You'd want to check out Terry White's website, terrywhite.com. He's got a post up, and it's going to be in the show notes, where he kind of gives a short overview of what's in the shipping version. And then you definitely want to go to Adobe TV at tv.adobe.com, and you're going to find a whole series that Julianne Cost did on Lightroom 4, which is really good. And it's going to get you up to speed with the new features right away.
Okay, and if you'll send me links to those, I'll make sure they're in the show notes so folks can go, and they may have to go looking for Aperture resources. If I can find any folks, or if, for that matter, if you have some, send them to me, chuck@macvoices.com. I'll make sure they get added to the show notes as we go forward. But
if anything, I bet that Don McAllister of Screencast Online has something on Aperture.
Good point.
If anyone's going to have it, it's him.
Good point. Yeah, I'll check and see in Don's catalog if it's available. And if not, you'll have to become a member. But who isn't a member of Screencast Online? You really should be. Okay, so let's shift gears to the Creative Cloud, because this, again, is an evolution, as I understand it, from an Adobe standpoint. And it's an evolution for a lot of us in the way we think about using our software. So introduce me to the Creative Cloud.
Well, so let's just take it step by step. Because back at Adobe Max in October, Adobe unveiled this Creative Cloud, which is basically a collection of all the software that they make that's currently in the master collection, plus Lightroom, plus, plus Edge and Muse, both which are in beta, public beta, and are code name right now. And these are all going to be in the Creative Cloud, along with the iPad, iPhone, Android apps, and a couple of different online services, for example, Typekit, which Adobe bought. And these are all going to be in this package called the Creative Cloud, which is going to be starting at $49.99 a month. So you're going to pay as long as you need it, you're going to pay for it, and you're going to get the software. When you stop paying for it, you don't have the software anymore, but you don't have to pay for it. So if you just use this 1 month and don't need it the next month, this is brilliant for you because you just have to spend $50 that month. You can tell your client that the access to these software is $50. That's all fine. So in that way, it's really good to be able to get updates as they come instead of waiting a year for a major update in the software, you can get it a month after release because you're subscribing to it over time. Now, and here's what has upset a lot of people, and I fully get that. You can interpret it as though you're just going to have to subscribe to the Creative Cloud. If you have Photoshop, if you have the Master Collection, you are going to be able to keep that. You're going to be able to upgrade like you always have been able to upgrade through the perpetual licensing model. You're going to be able to buy an upgrade to the suite. You're going to be able to buy the suite as you've always been able to, but you also have the Creative Cloud. So don't fear that your software that you have is just going to disappear and that you can't update it. So if you have CS5, CS5.5, you can update to CS6 when it's coming out. And also older versions, depending on the version that you have. Adobe's published a list on this.
I have some mixed feelings on this, and I'll let you tell me.
Don't everybody. And rightly so, of course.
Well, okay, so basically you're saying that the old software model that everybody's used to will work, that if you have purchased it, you can continue to do the upgrades, pricey though they are, and they're
about, if you level it out and equal it out, it's going to be about the same.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of what bothers me with the Creative Cloud thing. The idea, I mean, on the surface, it sounds great. Oh, I need this application for a month to do a project. And I'm sure that in the pro market, that's probably realistic. Or is it? I mean, if I'm a professional, do I really need Photoshop for a month? Or do I really need Illustrator
Right.
or any of this?
That's
or do I have to have them all the time?
Well, that's just, even if you have to have them all the time, paying per month still has a few advantages. For example, when you think of taxes, I don't know exactly how it works in the US, but here in Europe, you probably, if you're going to buy something as big as an upgrade to the Master Collection or the full Master Collection, you're going to have to write it off over several years. And the write-off's probably not finished when the next version that you want to have comes along and you have to upgrade. And in this case, you're going to be able to write off a bit of the suite every month for the entire year, which creates an even flow of expenses for you in your business, no matter if you're a big business, small business, home business. And if you count how much money you earn in a month, it's hopefully going to be more than $50 if you're in the market for the Creative Cloud. I mean, if you don't have the Master Collection today, or could see yourself buying the Master Collection today, or have sort of a need for one of the suites today, if you just use Photoshop, you're probably not going to want the Creative Cloud. It's really that simple. Because if you just use Photoshop, what are you going to do with Illustrator, InDesign, Dreamweaver, Premiere, Muse, Edge? The list goes on. So you have to weigh it.
Well, no, wait. Are you saying that? Well, let me back up.
Sure.
I thought that the Creative Cloud gave me access to everything.
It does.
Okay, so I'm not able to say, hey, I want Photoshop for 12 months, but I really don't care about Illustrator or Dreamweaver or any of the others. I mean, I'm buying the whole package, just like if I went over and bought the entire Adobe CS suite. That's what I'm getting in Creative Cloud.
Exactly. And now I'm guessing, and this is nothing I know, so I just guess that there are going to be, because Adobe today has a subscription model that's not as prominent as the Creative Cloud is, and it's not as frankly as good as the Creative Cloud, because the Creative Cloud's much cheaper than the current subscription model. But they have a subscription model, and it's had that for a few years. And so I'm betting that when the next version, CS6, is going to be released, we're going to see subscription packages. So if you just want to use Photoshop, you're going to have a package for you. So you don't have to buy the entire Creative Cloud for just Photoshop. See, that is my guess. And I mean, to me, that's just logical.
Well, and I agree. And that to me would make it worthy of some consideration, because right now I have CS3. I did not see any reason to go to CS4. or 5 or 6 because the enhancements don't really apply to me. Would I like to have it?
You can't
Absolutely.
say anything about CS6 just yet.
Well, yeah, okay, but yeah, that's true. That's to be fair. But
It didn't come out yet.
but I also am under a certain amount of pressure to do the upgrade so that when 6 comes out, I'm not left out of I'm too far behind, so now I have to buy a new package. And there are things in the Creative Suite I will never use, unfortunately. Or no, I better not say that. You never say never in this situation because sooner or later you end up with things. But the things I really don't need, I'm with you. I would like to see something that, if I could buy a limited set, buy 3 basics, let's say, and then add on, or maybe be able to jump in and out. I'd be much more inclined because right now, you're right. The tax write-off thing is a great comment. But I'm looking at it and saying, okay, for $600 a year, $49.95, call it $50, for 12 months, that is $600. 2 years, that's $1,200. Adobe's upgrade cycle, pricing and everything, it's not a great deal of a discount to go to the Creative Cloud.
You're gonna have an upgrade every 12 months to the suite, which is what Adobe announced when they shipped CS5. So a point update every 12 months, and then a full update every 24 months. So that much we know. Okay,
so I have to balance out what my upgrade cost is per year or every other year if I'm one of those people, like so many, that skip a generation unless there's something really sexy.
And there's a lot of people, so if you're a full professional photographer, and I'm not defining who's a professional photographer here, but if you feel like you're a professional photographer, you make money off your work, I'm not going into that debate because I know, a lot of people are going to be upset what I'm saying, but if you can't sit here and say, well, Photoshop, what I pay for Photoshop, I get back, and I definitely get it back. It's so worth it to me. If you can't sit that and say that to yourself, maybe you are an amateur photographer who picked up Photoshop, once you upgrade every other year. You're going to, you can keep upgrading every other year. You don't have to move to this Creative Cloud. The old model's still around. So keep doing that because it works fine for you and it allows you to keep Photoshop. If you think, well, Photoshop, that's such a steep cost to buy in, well, there's Elements. If you don't need the 3D capabilities of Photoshop Extended, don't get Photoshop Extended. Part of me likes to think it's that simple. If you don't need a 3D, why buy Extended when you can buy Standard? If you just need what Elements offer, why buy full Photoshop when you can buy Elements?
Yeah, well, and Elements is a whole nother discussion for a separate audience. But I agree with you. But I think there is this tendency, and I'm the first one to admit that I advise people to buy up on the food chain in anything because I don't think you're ever going to go down. You're always going to go up. You're always going to learn how to use what you've got, and then maybe want to do just a little more.
Exactly.
And not picking on Adobe, and this is absolutely not picking on Adobe. Every software vendor, I think they want you to upgrade to their pro model. So whatever it is, even in the iOS. So they take just a couple really key features that they think everybody would like to do and say, okay, you can use the free or the lower end model, or you can pay and you can get those features that you really want. That's not to say that the lower end models are not functional or anything like that. 98% of the cases they are very functional, but there's that 1 or 2 things that you really want to do that hook you, and that's just good marketing. So I don't have an issue with that.
Well, and here's the deal. If you look at Elements, say 4 years ago, and you said, no, there are these 3 or 4 features. For example, you needed masks, and there was no masks in Photoshop Elements. Well, look at it again, because it evolves too. And now they've added masks. There's one feature. When I used to teach Elements a lot, I sat there saying, well, so doing this effect would require masks. So we're going to have to use it a bit differently. It's not as good. So we have partially masks. And these are good things, which are in full Photoshop, except now they are in Elements too, which is lovely. And Elements, just that version took a big step up. But again, that's, we're not here to talk about Elements today.
No, but your point's well taken.
Yeah, right.
If you're like me, that you're stuck on CS3 and you're thinking, okay, what do I do? Before you plunk down the money to go to 5 in prep for 6, maybe you want to go and take a look at some of the alternatives, notably, and for this discussion, Elements, to see if it meets your needs.
And let's state for very clearly, go and check out, because a while back, Adobe said you have to be on 5 to get to 6. They've since reversed that policy. So if you still think you have to be on 5 to get to 6, look again, look at it again, and see which version that you have that you can get on 6. Now, it might be more expensive for you if you don't have 5 to move to 6. And that's logical because someone who's moved to 6 has spent more money. But again, check the upgrading chart.
Agreed. Agreed. Erik, one other thing I want to make sure we touch on before we leave this is performance. We're talking about a web-based solution as opposed to having the...
We are not. We are not. We are not talking about a web. So I think I should start it with this. Creative Cloud is just another way of getting Photoshop. You're going to have the Photoshop app on your computer. Doesn't matter. It's the same Photoshop, very same Photoshop as not as you've always had, because this is going to be a new version, but it's going to be the same Photoshop app on your computer. So if you buy it with a perpetual licensing, you're going to have it on your computer. If you use the Creative Cloud, you're going to have it on your computer. The only thing is, once in a while, you're going to have to verify that you're still a subscriber for Photoshop to be able to keep working. And so if you have concerns over that, I'm not going to go over what we know about how that's going to work, but there's been talk and discussion about that. Adobe's released some details. So if you're concerned about it, go check out some of the Adobe sites, and you're going to be able to find out how that's going to affect you if you opt for the Creative Cloud. And so I don't know when CS6 is going to be released, or what I think is going to be called CS6 anyway. When that's going to be released, I don't know. And the only ones who know can't say. But look at this way. They said a 24-month cycle and a 12-month cycle. So go back and look when CS5 was released, and we're all in agreement that this spring, rather soon, we're going to see a new version of the Creative Suite. So instead of saying, when it comes out, I need everything now, because when it comes out, I want to be ready to act the moment it hits. Well, they're going to release all the details, exactly all the details, when it ships. So it's not long, and you're going to be able to make your full judgment, read everything about it, and at that point, make a decision. So just don't judge everything right now based on what you see right now. Think Adobe's going to release more information when it ships, and then you can make your full informed decision.
It sounds like it's going to be a little bit of a complex decision. It's not just either or. There are going to be a lot of what-ifs in the middle.
Well, there are pros of the Creative Cloud. There are cons of the Creative Cloud. And it's just a matter, and of course, there are cons of buying a full version of the Creative Suite, and there are pros of doing it, and there's always been. So you just have to weigh the pros against the cons, as always, and see which one's going to be most favorable for you.
I have an idea. We'll have you back to talk about it once all the details are out, so you can walk us through those pros and cons.
I'd love to be back on that time.
Good. We will do it. Erik, thanks. It's been an interesting discussion about Lightroom, and certainly it's given me some things to think about with Creative Suite and Creative Cloud from Adobe and what I may do with it. So unfortunately, I think you just confused me.
Oh, I'm sorry. just my sort of key conclusion is, for Lightroom, try it before you buy it, because they allow you to do that. For Creative Cloud, wait until you have all the information and make an informed decision. That's my keyword of the day.
I'm going to wrap with that. That's Erik Bernskiold. He has given us all we need to know about Lightroom and Creative Cloud, at least as we know it now, and we have more to learn. Erik, tell us where folks can go to learn more about what you do, and maybe even engage your services if they want a website or some work done.
Well, first of all, you can catch me. I blog at erikbernskiold.com. That's BERNSKIOLD, and Erik spelled with a K. And there you can find Photoshop tutorials in the Creative Suite, and you can also find links to my web design company, xldstudios.com, where you can go if you want a website, as Chuck said.
And I am an XLD Studios customer, and I'm a very happy one. So thank you, Erik. And thank you for joining me for this edition of MacVoices TV.
Thank you for having me on.
Folks, as I said before, I'll have links in the show notes to everything Erik and I have talked about, including links to find him everywhere he just talked about, and to everything that you should know about the MacVoices group. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the Talk of the Mac community. Thanks for watching. MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices group and a member of Mac Level 10.